The phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday in February, and I knew immediately something was wrong. My daughter Isabel never called that late unless it was urgent. I picked up on the second ring, already sitting straighter in my chair. "Mom?" Her voice came through broken and small, trembling in a way that made my stomach drop. "Mom, I need help. What happened? Where are you?" I pushed away from my desk where I had been reviewing architectural plans for a hotel renovation in downtown Phoenix. The blueprints scattered across the surface suddenly seemed completely unimportant. "I'm at Grandma's house. Or I was." "Mom, my key doesn't work anymore." She was crying now. Real sobs that made her words come out in gasps. "I've been standing outside for 2 hours in the rain. It's been pouring and I'm completely soaked, and she finally opened the door, but she won't let me in." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you mean she won't let you in? That's your home. You've lived there since you started college." "She says I don't live here anymore. She changed the locks, and she's saying I need to find somewhere else to stay." Isabel's voice cracked. "I don't understand what I did wrong. I paid rent this month just like always. She just kept saying I needed to learn responsibility, and that she was done enabling me." I was already grabbing my keys, my phone pressed between my shoulder and ear. "Stay right there. I'm coming to get you." She already left me standing on the porch, Mom. She closed the door in my face and turned off the porch light. I'm sitting in my car now, but I don't know where to go. The drive to my mother's house took 20 minutes, but felt like hours. Rain pelted my windshield in sheets, the wipers working frantically to keep up. My mother had insisted Isabel live with her when my daughter got accepted to Arizona State University 3 years ago. It made sense at the time. My mother lived 10 minutes from campus, and I had just accepted a position as senior project manager at a commercial architecture firm that required long hours and occasional travel. My mother had seemed thrilled at the prospect of having her granddaughter around. "She can help me with things around the house," my mother had said back then, her smile warm and convincing. "And I'll make sure she stays focused on her studies. You know how college students can be, Cecilia. She needs structure." I should have seen the warning signs earlier. My mother had always been controlling, always needed to be in charge of every situation. Growing up, she had micromanaged every aspect of my life until I finally moved out at 19. Even now, at 62, she expected everyone to bend to her will, but I thought she would be different with Isabel. I thought grandmothers were supposed to be softer, kinder versions of the mothers they once were. I found Isabel's car parked 3 houses down from my mother's place, headlights off, windows fogged from the inside. She was hunched in the driver's seat, still wearing her university sweatshirt that was plastered to her skin. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Get in my car," I said, opening her door. "We're going back to my place." She gathered her backpack and followed me, moving like someone in shock. Once we were both in my car with the heat blasting, I turned to really look at her. She was shivering, teeth chattering, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Tell me exactly what happened." "I had a late study session at the library for my marketing final. I got back around 7 p.m., and my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I thought maybe it was broken or something, so I kept trying. Then I knocked and rang the doorbell, but nobody answered for the longest time. I could see lights on inside and hear the television. Finally, Grandma opened the door and just stood there looking at me like I was a stranger. She said I was irresponsible and disrespectful, and that she had warned me this would happen if I didn't change my ways. But Mom, I don't know what I did. I've been doing everything she asked. I clean my room. I do my share of chores. I pay my rent on time. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did she say anything else? She said I was just like you, that I was selfish and ungrateful, and that she wasn't going to waste any more of her time on someone who didn't appreciate her sacrifices. Isabel's voice went quiet. What did she mean by that? What sacrifices? I started driving toward my apartment, my mind racing through memories I had tried for years to bury. My mother had said the same things to me 2 decades ago when I told her I was pregnant with Isabel and planned to keep the baby. She had called me irresponsible, selfish, a disappointment. She had wanted me to give Isabel up for adoption, and when I refused, she had barely spoken to me for 3 years. "Your grandmother has very specific ideas about how people should behave," I said carefully. "And when things don't go exactly the way she wants, she tends to punish people by cutting them off." Isabel stayed with me that night, borrowing my clothes and curling up on my couch under every blanket I owned. I made her tea and watched her fall asleep with exhaustion etched into every line of her young face. She was 20 years old, in her junior year of college, and she had just been thrown out of her home in the rain like she meant nothing. I barely slept. Instead, I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling, fury building in my chest with each passing hour. This was not the first time my mother had done something like this. She had a pattern of drawing people close only to shove them away the moment they failed to meet her impossible standards. She had done it to me repeatedly throughout my childhood and young adulthood. She had done it to my father before he finally divorced her when I was 16. She had done it to her sister, my Aunt Dorothy, who had stopped speaking to her 15 years ago, after some perceived slight I never fully understood, but doing it to Isabel crossed a line I could not forgive. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice crisp and unbothered. "I figured you would call eventually," she said. "I suppose Isabel came crying to you with her sob story." "You left her standing in the rain for 2 hours," I said, keeping my voice level through sheer force of will. "You changed the locks without warning and threw her out of the house she's been paying rent for. She needed to learn a lesson about consequences. She's been getting lazy, showing up late for our dinner times, leaving dishes in the sink overnight. I warned her multiple times that I wouldn't tolerate that kind of behavior in my home. She's a college student with a full course load and a part-time job at the campus bookstore. She's exhausted. And those are not reasons to make someone homeless." My mother's voice went cold. "My house. My rules. If she can't follow simple instructions, she can find somewhere else to live. I'm not running a charity here. I did you a favor taking her in, and this is how both of you repay me, with disrespect and entitlement. She's your granddaughter. And you're my daughter. But that didn't stop you from being a constant disappointment. At least I tried with Isabel. I tried to teach her discipline and respect, but she's too much like you, Cecilia. Weak and overly emotional and incapable of appreciating what people do for her." I closed my eyes and took a long breath. This was vintage behavior from my mother. Attack, belittle, make herself the victim in every scenario. I had spent years in therapy learning to recognize these patterns and protect myself from them. "Isabel will be staying with me from now on," I said. "I'll come by this weekend to pick up her things." "Fine. Good riddance to both of you. Don't expect me to be there when you need something, Cecilia. I'm done being used by my own family." She hung up before I could respond. Isabel and I spent that Saturday moving her belongings out of my mother's house. My mother had left the front door unlocked, but made herself scarce, refusing to answer when we knocked or called out. We worked in silence, carrying boxes and bags down to my car, loading up everything Isabel owned. It took 3 trips back and forth between my mother's house and my 2-bedroom apartment. My apartment was not large. I had moved there 4 years ago after my divorce, choosing a place that fit my budget on a single income. Isabel would have to sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. It was not ideal, but it was temporary. She only had 1 more year of school left, and I could manage the cramped quarters until then. "I'm sorry for being such a burden," Isabel said on our last trip, her arms full of clothes still on hangers. "You are not a burden. You are my daughter and I love you. What your grandmother did was cruel and wrong, and none of this is your fault." But even as I said the words, I watched my mother's house disappear in my rearview mirror and felt something hard and cold settle into the pit of my stomach. My mother would not get away with this. She had hurt me countless times over the years, and I had always swallowed it. Always tried to maintain some kind of relationship for the sake of family, but hurting Isabel was different. That was unforgivable. 3 weeks passed. Isabel adjusted to living with me, though I could see the strain it put on her. She studied at odd hours to avoid disturbing me when I needed to work from home. She kept her belongings meticulously organized in the small corner of the living room I had cleared for her. She apologized constantly for taking up space, for using hot water, for existing in my life. "Stop apologizing," I told her one evening as we sat eating dinner at my small kitchen table. "You belong here. This is your home now. I just feel guilty. You weren't planning on having a roommate, and now you're stuck with me. And Grandma hasn't even called to check if I'm okay. It's like she doesn't care at all." That was when I realized my mother probably expected us to come crawling back, begging for her forgiveness. She had always operated that way, push people away, then wait for them to return with apologies and promises to do better. It fed her need for control, her need to be needed. But I had no intention of giving her that satisfaction. April arrived with unseasonably warm weather that made Phoenix feel like an oven even in the early morning hours. I was overseeing the final phases of a boutique hotel renovation downtown, managing subcontractors, and dealing with the endless problems that arose when trying to blend historic architecture with modern amenities. The project was high-profile enough that my firm's partners watched my every move, and I was determined not to give them any reason to question my capabilities. Isabel had thrown herself into her studies with renewed intensity. Her grades had always been good, but now she seemed driven by something deeper. She wanted to prove she was not the failure my mother had implied she was. She worked late into the night, took on extra credit projects, and barely gave herself time to breathe. I worried about her, but understood the impulse. I had done the same thing after my mother's various rejections over the years. Work became armor. Achievement became proof of worth. Then, on a Thursday afternoon in late April, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Cecilia, it's Dorothy, my mother's sister." I had not spoken to her in probably 5 years, not since a brief conversation at a cousin's funeral. We exchanged holiday cards, and that was the extent of our relationship. "Dorothy, This is a surprise. I heard about what happened with Isabel. I wanted to call sooner, but I wasn't sure if you would want to hear from me. I stepped away from the construction site, finding a quiet corner where I could talk without competing with the sound of power tools. How did you find out? Your mother told me. She called me last week, wanting to complain about how ungrateful you and Isabel are. She wanted me to agree with her, to validate her decision to throw Isabel out. Dorothy paused. I told her she was wrong. I told her what she did was cruel and that she should be ashamed of herself. I'm guessing that didn't go over well. She hung up on me. But Cecilia, I called because I wanted you to know something. Your mother did the exact same thing to me when my daughter Katie was in college. Katie stayed with her for 1 semester, and your mother kicked her out over something trivial, a missed curfew or dirty dishes or some other nonsense. It devastated Katie. She ended up dropping out of school for a year because she couldn't handle the stress and instability. My grip tightened on the phone. I had no idea. Your mother made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would be inappropriate to air family business. She's always been good at making people stay silent about the things she does. Dorothy's voice grew sharper. But I'm done protecting her. What she does to people is not okay. She pulls them close, makes them dependent on her, and then she tears them apart when they don't perform exactly the way she wants. It's a pattern, and someone needs to stop enabling it. We talked for another 20 minutes. Dorothy told me stories I had never heard. Instances of my mother's cruelty stretched back over decades. My mother had driven away friends, family members, neighbors, anyone who got close enough to become a target. She would offer help, insert herself into people's lives, and then use that position to exert control. When people inevitably failed to meet her standards, she would cut them off with surgical precision, always making sure they understood it was their fault, their failure, their inadequacy. Why does she do it? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted the answer. Control. Validation. Who knows? Maybe something happened to her when she was young that made her this way, but at some point, the reason stops mattering. The behavior is what matters, and the behavior needs to have consequences. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot and let Dorothy's words sink in. My mother had done this to multiple people. This was not about Isabel failing to meet some reasonable standard. This was about my mother's need to manipulate and control, and her willingness to destroy people emotionally to maintain that control. That evening, I found Isabel at my apartment, sprawled on the couch with textbooks surrounding her like a fortress. She looked up when I came in, her expression exhausted. "Bad day?" she asked. "Interesting day." I set down my bag and sat in the chair across from her. "I talked to your great-aunt Dorothy. She told me your grandmother did the same thing to her daughter Katie that she did to you, kicked her out over something minor and made her feel worthless." Isabel's eyes widened. "Really?" "It's a pattern with her. She's done it to multiple people over the years, and I've been thinking about something. Your grandmother expects us to come back eventually. She expects us to apologize and beg for her forgiveness so she can feel powerful and needed. That's how she operates. Are we going to do that?" "No," I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "We're not going to do that at all. In fact, I think it's time your grandmother learned what consequences actually feel like." Something shifted in Isabel's expression, a spark of interest replacing the exhaustion. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm tired of letting her hurt people with no repercussions. I'm tired of watching her use people and throw them away, and I'm tired of her getting to play the victim when she's the one causing all the damage." "Mom, what are you planning?" I smiled. But it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally decided to stop being the bigger person, to stop turning the other cheek. "I'm planning to give your grandmother exactly what she deserves. I'm planning to make sure she understands what it feels like to be cut off and shut out with nowhere to turn." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." The opportunity presented itself 3 weeks later in a way I could never have anticipated. I was having lunch with my colleague Trevor, a project coordinator who had worked at the firm for 15 years and knew everyone worth knowing in Phoenix's commercial real estate and development circles. We were discussing the hotel renovation timeline when he mentioned something that made me pause mid-bite. "By the way, your mother is selling her house, right? I saw the listing come across my feed this morning." I set down my fork carefully. "What?" "Yeah, the house on Saguaro Canyon Road, listed for $650,000. Nice property, good bones, established neighborhood. Should sell quickly in this market." He pulled out his phone and showed me the listing. There was my mother's house, photographed in golden hour light, looking pristine and inviting in a way that felt like a lie. My mind raced. My mother had lived in that house for 28 years. She had bought it after my father left, using the divorce settlement to make a substantial down payment. She loved that house. She had told me repeatedly over the years that they would have to carry her out in a coffin before she would ever leave it. When did this go live? This morning. Why? Are you interested? I know the listing agent if you want an inside track. Maybe. Let me think about it. I spent the rest of lunch barely tasting my food, my thoughts churning. Why would my mother sell the house? She had retirement income from her years working as an office administrator for a medical supply company. She had Social Security. The house was paid off. She had everything she needed to live comfortably, unless she did not. That evening, I did something I was not particularly proud of. I called my mother's neighbor, a woman named Patricia, who had lived next door for over a decade. Patricia and I had always been friendly during my visits, exchanging pleasantries and occasional favors. "Cecilia, how lovely to hear from you," Patricia said when she answered. "How is Isabel doing?" "She's doing well, thank you. Listen, I heard my mother is selling the house. Do you know anything about that?" Patricia's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, honey, I probably shouldn't say anything, but yes. She told me about 2 months ago that she was planning to move. She said she wanted to downsize, maybe get a condo somewhere with less maintenance. But between you and me, I think she might be having money troubles." My stomach tightened. "What makes you say that?" "Well, she's been cutting corners on things. She stopped having the landscaping company come by, and her yard has gotten pretty overgrown. She's been driving less, probably to save on gas, and I've seen her checking her mail very anxiously, like she's worried about bills. Plus, she mentioned something about unexpected expenses that had depleted her savings. She didn't go into details, but she seemed stressed about it. We talked for a few more minutes before I hung up, my mind working through possibilities. I had assumed my mother was financially stable. She had always presented herself that way, always acted like she had more than enough. But what if that was not true? What if she had been living beyond her means, using credit to maintain an appearance of comfortable retirement? I spent the next 2 days doing research. I pulled up property records, looked into average costs for her neighborhood, researched what kind of income her pension and Social Security would provide. I even drove by her house late one evening and saw what Patricia had described. The yard looked neglected. The exterior paint was peeling in spots. The whole property had a slightly shabby appearance that seemed wrong for someone who had always been meticulous about appearances. Then I had an idea. It was bold and possibly crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. I called Trevor. "That listing you showed me, is your agent friend someone you trust?" "Absolutely." "Why?" "I want to make an offer on my mother's house, but I need to do it through an LLC, so she doesn't know it's me. Can your friend help with that?" Trevor was quiet for a moment. "You want to buy your mother's house without her knowing?" "Yes." "That's either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. Can you help me?" He laughed. "Yeah, I can help you. But you're going to have to tell me the story behind this eventually." I spent the weekend working with Trevor and his agent friend, a sharp woman named Vanessa, who asked very few questions and seemed amused by the whole situation. We set up an LLC with a generic name that could belong to anyone. We structured an offer that was fair, but not generous. It was exactly the kind of offer someone in financial distress would likely accept, especially if they needed to close quickly. "Your mother's agent will present the offer," Vanessa explained. "As far as anyone knows, this is just another investment buyer looking to flip or rent the property. Your name won't appear anywhere in the paperwork until closing, and even then, only as the member of the LLC. How long until we know if she accepts? In this market, probably within 48 hours. If she's motivated to sell, it could be even faster." I told Isabel what I was planning that night. She stared at me like I had grown a second head. "You're buying Grandma's house? The house she kicked me out of?" "Yes." "Why?" I thought about how to explain it. "Because your grandmother operates on the belief that she holds all the power. She thinks she can treat people however she wants because she's the one with resources, with stability, with a home to offer or withhold. I want to take that power away. I want her to sell the house thinking she's moving on to something better, and then I want her to realize she made a terrible mistake. But what are you going to do with the house once you own it? I haven't figured that part out yet. Maybe I'll rent it out. Maybe I'll sell it again. Maybe I'll let it sit empty just to prove a point." I looked at my daughter, seeing the uncertainty in her face. "I know this seems petty. It doesn't seem petty. It seems like justice." Isabel's expression hardened. "She threw me out in the rain, Mom. She made me feel like I was worthless, and she's done the same thing to other people. Maybe it's time someone made her feel what that's like." The offer was accepted 36 hours later. My mother's agent called Vanessa to say my mother was thrilled with the terms and wanted to close as quickly as possible. She needed the money, the agent had said. She had some expenses that required immediate attention. Perfect. The closing was scheduled for the first week of June, 6 weeks after the offer was accepted. During that time, I watched my mother's social media posts with a mixture of fascination and disgust. She posted constantly about her exciting new chapter, about downsizing and simplifying her life, about how she was finally free from the burden of maintaining a large house. She never mentioned Isabel. She never mentioned me. In her version of events, We simply did not exist. She's acting like she chose this, Isabel said one evening, scrolling through her grandmother's posts on her phone. Like selling the house was this empowering decision and not something she had to do because she's in financial trouble. That's how she operates. She rewrites history to make herself the hero of every story. I had done more digging into my mother's finances over the past weeks. Through careful conversations with Patricia and some discreet inquiries, I had pieced together a picture of someone who had been living well beyond her means for years. My mother had taken out a home equity line of credit 5 years ago and had apparently maxed it out. She had credit card debt that she had been servicing with minimum payments. She had made some poor investment decisions that had lost significant amounts of her retirement savings. The house sale would net her roughly $400,000 after paying off the equity line and closing costs. She planned to buy a small condo for around $200,000, leaving her with $200,000 to rebuild her savings. It would be tight, but manageable if she was careful. But I had other plans. The day before closing, I drove past my mother's house and saw a moving truck in the driveway. She was already packing up, already preparing for her fresh start. I felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly when I remembered the image of Isabel standing in the rain, locked out and unwanted. The closing happened at a title company office in Scottsdale. I did not attend in person. Vanessa handled everything for the LLC while I waited at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, my phone in my hand, refreshing my email every few seconds. At 2 p.m., Vanessa texted me, "Closed. House is yours." Your mother seemed very happy. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of what I had just done. I owned my mother's house. The home she had loved and been so proud of now belonged to me, and she had no idea. But owning the house was only the first step. The real plan was about to unfold. I waited exactly 1 week, long enough for my mother to settle into her new condo, to unpack her boxes, to start feeling secure in her fresh start. Then I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice carrying that particular tone of martyred patience she always used with me. "Cecilia, I was wondering when you would call. I wanted to give you time to settle into your new place." How thoughtful. Though I notice you never offered to help me move. I had to hire movers with money I could barely spare, but I suppose that's typical. You've never been there when I needed you. I ignored the bait. "How's the condo?" "It's fine. Smaller than the house, obviously, but sufficient for my needs. And frankly, it's a relief not to have that large property to maintain anymore. I'm quite enjoying the freedom." "I'm glad to hear that. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. It's about Isabel." My mother's voice went cold. "I have nothing to say about Isabel. She made her choices." "She didn't make any choices, Mom. You threw her out for no real reason. You hurt her badly, and you seem to have no remorse about it at all. If she told you she did nothing wrong, she's lying. That girl was disrespectful and lazy, and I was not going to tolerate it in my home. I did what I had to do to teach her accountability." "Accountability?" I let the word hang in the air. "That's an interesting concept coming from you. Tell me something, Mom. Have you ever been held accountable for the things you've done to people?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the pattern of behavior you've exhibited for decades. Drawing people close, making them dependent on you, and then cutting them off when they fail to meet your impossible standards. You did it to me. You did it to Isabel. You did it to Aunt Dorothy's daughter, Katie. How many others have there been? I don't have to listen to this." Her voice shook with anger. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family, the things I've done for you, for Isabel. And this is the thanks I get? Accusations and disrespect? I'm not calling to argue with you. I'm calling to tell you that things are going to be different from now on. You're not going to treat people like they're disposable anymore. And how exactly do you plan to stop me? You have no power over my life, Cecilia. You never have. Actually, I have more power than you realize, but you'll find that out soon enough." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through my system. That had been the easy part. What came next would be harder, but far more satisfying. Over the next 2 weeks, I put the rest of my plan into motion. I contacted a property management company and had them inspect the house thoroughly. There were issues that needed addressing. The roof needed repairs. The plumbing had problems. The electrical system was outdated. The HVAC unit was on its last legs. My mother had deferred maintenance for years, probably because she could not afford to fix things properly. I had all of it repaired. I spent $20,000 updating and fixing everything that was wrong with the house. I had the exterior repainted. I had the yard professionally landscaped. I turned the house into something beautiful again, something that looked exactly the way it had when my mother had first bought it 28 years ago. Then I listed it for rent. The ad was specific. Charming 3-bedroom home in established Phoenix neighborhood, perfect for families or professionals. $1,800 per month. 6-month lease minimum. Available immediately. I knew my mother checked real estate listings obsessively. She always had. She liked to keep track of property values in her old neighborhood, liked to feel connected to the place she had left. It took her 3 days to find the listing. The call came on a Saturday morning. I was having coffee with Isabel on my apartment balcony when my phone rang with my mother's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering, making her wait the way she had made Isabel wait in the rain. "Hello, Mom?" "What the hell have you done?" Her voice was shaking, high-pitched with fury and something else. Fear, maybe, or disbelief. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. My house. You bought my house. I saw the rental listing, and I called the property management company and they told me the owner's name. It's your LLC, Cecilia. You bought my house and you never told me." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. "Yes, I did." Why would you do that? Why would you do something so sneaky and underhanded? Because I could. Because you taught me that the person with the power gets to make the rules, and right now I have the power. This is insane. You've lost your mind. You wasted money buying a house you don't need just to what? Make some kind of point? Actually, I'm going to make a profit on this. Rental income in that neighborhood is strong, and property values are only going up. It was a sound investment. I paused. Plus, I fixed everything you let fall apart. The roof, the plumbing, the electrical system. I spent $20,000 making the house beautiful again, you know? The way it should have been maintained all along. I couldn't afford those repairs. I was living on a fixed income. And yet, you had enough money to take cruises last year. I saw the photos on social media. 3 cruises in 8 months. That's expensive, Mom. Much more expensive than a new water heater. She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something brittle. "What do you want from me? Do you want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I kicked Isabel out. I was wrong. Now will you sell me back my house? No. Cecilia, please. That house is my home. I lived there for almost 3 decades. You can't just take it from me. I didn't take it from you. You sold it. You wanted the money more than you wanted the house, remember? You made that choice. I didn't know I was selling it to you. I would never have agreed if I had known." Exactly. And that's the point. You made a decision based on what you thought would benefit you, without considering the bigger picture, without considering what you were giving up, kind of like when you kicked Isabel out, without considering what that would do to her. This is not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. You wanted to teach Isabel about consequences? Consider this your lesson. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, rapid and shallow. "I need that house, Cecilia. The condo I bought, it's not enough. It's too small, and the homeowners association fees are higher than I was told, and I'm struggling to make ends meet. I need to sell the condo and move back into the house. I made a mistake selling it. Then you'll have to live with that mistake. The same way you expected Isabel to live with her supposed mistakes. I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. You're right. You are my mother, and Isabel is your granddaughter. But that didn't stop you from leaving her standing in the rain with nowhere to go. That didn't stop you from changing the locks and telling her she was worthless. I never said she was worthless. You said she was just like me, selfish and ungrateful. You said she didn't appreciate your sacrifices. How do you think that made her feel? How do you think it made me feel when you said the same things to me for years?" My mother started crying. They were not gentle tears. They were harsh, gasping sobs that sounded like they were being torn out of her. "Please, Cecilia. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt people. But I'm still your mother and I need help." For a moment, just a moment, I wavered. This was my mother. The woman who had raised me, who had taught me to read, who had stayed up with me when I was sick. Whatever else she had done, she was still my mother. But then I thought about Isabel's face that night in the rain. I thought about Dorothy's daughter Katie dropping out of college. I thought about all the people my mother had hurt over the years, with her need for control and her inability to accept anyone who did not meet her impossible standards. "I'll make you a deal," I said slowly. "You can rent the house from me. Rent my own house. It's not your house anymore. It's mine. But yes, you can rent it. $1,800 a month. The same rate I'm listing it for. That's actually below market value for a house that size in that neighborhood. So really, I'm being generous. I can't afford that. You know I can't. Not with the condo payment and my other expenses. Then you'll need to make some choices. Sell the condo. Cut back on your spending. Stop taking cruises and buying things you don't need. You know, learn some responsibility. That's what you're always telling everyone else to do, right? Cecilia, please. Those are the terms. You can take them or leave them. But either way, I'm not selling you the house back. I'm not giving you the power to hurt anyone else the way you hurt Isabel. This is cruel. You're being deliberately cruel. No, Mom. I'm teaching you about consequences. There's a difference. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hand was shaking as I set the phone down on the table. Isabel was staring at me, her eyes wide. "Did you really just do that?" "I did." She was crying, I know. "Do you think she'll actually rent the house?" "I don't know. Probably not. She'll probably try to find somewhere cheaper, but that's not really the point. The point is that she finally understands what it feels like to be on the other side of her own behavior. She spent years making people feel powerless and small. Now she knows how that feels. Isabel was quiet for a moment, processing everything she had heard. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for standing up for me, for not letting her get away with it. You never have to thank me for protecting you. That's what mothers are supposed to do." 3 days after our phone call, I received an email from my mother. It was long and rambling, filled with justifications and accusations, veering between anger and self-pity. She blamed me for ruining her life. She blamed Isabel for being ungrateful. She blamed my father for leaving her decades ago. She blamed the financial advisors who had supposedly steered her wrong with bad investments. She blamed everyone except herself. At the end of the email, she wrote, "I hope you're satisfied. I hope destroying your own mother makes you feel powerful, but you've crossed a line you can never come back from. Don't expect me to forgive this." I did not respond. There was nothing to say that would make a difference. My mother was incapable of seeing herself clearly, incapable of understanding that her current situation was the direct result of her own choices. She had chosen to live beyond her means. She had chosen to hurt people who loved her. She had chosen to sell the house. Every consequence she was facing now was one she had created for herself, but apparently, the email was not enough. My mother needed to make sure I understood the full depth of her displeasure. She started calling me multiple times a day, leaving long voicemails that ranged from tearful pleas to vitriolic attacks. When I blocked her number, she started calling from different phones. She showed up at my apartment twice, pounding on the door and demanding I talk to her. The second time she showed up, I called the police and had her removed from the property. The officer who responded was patient but firm with her, explaining that she could not harass me at my home. My mother had stood in the parking lot, her face red with fury, screaming that I was an ungrateful daughter who had stolen her home. "Ma'am, according to the property records, she purchased the home legally through a sale you agreed to," the officer said. "There's no theft here." She tricked me. She hid who she was." "That's not illegal. You're going to need to leave now, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." I watched from my apartment window as my mother finally got into her car and drove away, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Isabel stood beside me, her face pale. "This is getting scary, Mom. I know. But she'll calm down eventually. She always does when she realizes she's not getting her way." But my mother did not calm down. Instead, she escalated. She started posting on social media about how her daughter had betrayed her, how I had stolen her home through deception, how I was vindictive and cruel. She did not use my name directly, but anyone who knew our family could read between the lines. My phone started getting messages from distant relatives and old family friends, people I had not talked to in years, asking what was going on. I ignored most of them. But when my cousin Jessica called, I answered. Jessica was Dorothy's daughter, Katie's sister, and she had always been kind to me. "Cecilia, I just want you to know that whatever your mom is saying on social media, I don't believe it. My mom told me what you did, and honestly, I think it's brilliant. Aunt Helen has gotten away with treating people terribly for too long. Maybe this will finally make her see what she's been doing." I appreciate that, Jessica. "It's been harder than I thought it would be." "Of course it has. She's your mom, but sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing. Katie still has scars from what Aunt Helen did to her, emotional scars that affected her for years. What you're doing isn't just about you and Isabel. It's about breaking a cycle." After we hung up, I sat with Jessica's words, breaking a cycle. That was what this was really about. My mother had spent decades hurting people and facing no consequences. She had learned that she could manipulate and control without any real repercussions. Someone had to show her that actions had consequences, even for her. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Vanessa, the real estate agent who had helped me buy the house. "I thought you should know. Your mother tried to contact me. She wanted to know if there was any way to reverse the sale. She claimed there was fraud involved." "What did you tell her?" I told her that all the paperwork was legal and binding, that she had signed everything willingly, and that there was no basis for any kind of fraud claim. She was not happy. She threatened to sue me, actually. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this. Don't be. I deal with difficult people all the time, but I wanted to give you a heads up that she's trying to find legal angles. You might want to talk to a lawyer, just to be safe." I did talk to a lawyer. A friend from college who specialized in real estate law looked over all the paperwork and confirmed what I already knew. Everything had been done legally. My mother had no grounds for any kind of lawsuit. She was simply angry that she had been outsmarted. The most she could try is claiming emotional distress or something equally flimsy, my friend said. But given that she was the one who chose to sell, and given that you paid fair market value, no judge would take that seriously. You're in the clear legally. But morally? My friend smiled. Morally, I think your mother had this coming. By July, my mother had stopped trying to contact me directly. The social media posts had tapered off after several of her friends pointed out that publicly airing family disputes was inappropriate. She had retreated into silence, which I found more unsettling than the barrage of communication. My mother was never quiet, unless she was plotting something. I found out what she was plotting when Patricia, the neighbor, called me in early August. Cecilia, I thought you should know that your mother came by the house yesterday. She was walking around the property, looking in windows. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was checking on her investment. She seemed confused, like she thought she still owned the place. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Did she try to go inside? No, but she stood on the porch for a long time. She had keys in her hand, old keys that don't work anymore, obviously, and she kept trying them in the lock. It was sad, honestly. She looked lost. I thanked Patricia and immediately called the property management company. I had them change the locks again and install a security system with cameras. I also had them send my mother a formal cease and desist letter, warning her that any further attempts to access the property would result in criminal trespass charges. The property manager called me after delivering the letter. She did not take it well. She started crying and saying this was still her home, that she had made a mistake selling it. I felt bad for her, but legally, she has no right to be there. I understand. Thank you for handling it. That evening, Isabel and I were having dinner when she asked the question I had been dreading. Do you think you went too far? I set down my fork. What do you mean? With Grandma. I mean, she's clearly falling apart. Maybe we should talk to her. Try to work something out. Work what out? She hasn't apologized for what she did to you. She hasn't shown any remorse. All she's done is play the victim and try to manipulate everyone into feeling sorry for her. I know. But she's still family, and she seems like she's really struggling. I looked at my daughter, seeing the compassion in her face that my mother had tried to beat out of her by calling her soft and weak. That compassion was not weakness, it was strength. But it was also the very thing my mother would exploit if given the chance. Let me ask you something, I said. If your grandmother had the power right now, if she owned the house and we needed help, do you think she would give it to us? Do you think she would show us mercy? Isabel was quiet for a long moment. No. She would probably tell us we needed to learn responsibility. Exactly. Your grandmother only understands power. She only respects people who have leverage over her. The moment we show weakness, the moment we give her an opening, she'll use it to hurt us again. I'm not willing to risk that. So, what happens now? She just suffers and we watch. She's not suffering, Isabel. She's facing consequences. There's a difference. She has a place to live. She has income. She's not homeless or destitute. She's just not living the lifestyle she wanted, and she's angry about that. But that's not my responsibility to fix. The next day, I received a letter from my mother, not an email this time, but an actual handwritten letter, delivered through the mail. The handwriting was shaky, less controlled than usual. Cecilia, it began, I've had time to think about everything that has happened, and I've come to realize that I may have made some mistakes in how I handled things with Isabel. I reacted out of frustration and exhaustion, and I said things I didn't mean. I'm willing to admit that I was too harsh. I read the letter twice, looking for the apology that never came. She said she may have made mistakes. She said she was too harsh, but she never said she was sorry. She never acknowledged the pain she had caused. The letter was an attempt at manipulation, carefully worded to sound like remorse without actually taking responsibility. The letter went on. I think we should meet in person to discuss this situation. I believe we can come to an arrangement that works for both of us. I'm willing to forgive the way you've treated me if you're willing to forgive my mistakes. We're family, and family should support each other. I showed the letter to Isabel, who read it with growing disbelief. She thinks she's the one who needs to forgive you. Of course she does. In her mind, I'm the villain in this story. She's just a poor victim who made minor mistakes and is being punished disproportionately. Are you going to meet with her? No. Meeting with her would just give her an opportunity to manipulate the situation. She doesn't want reconciliation. She wants control. And I'm not giving that to her. Instead of responding to the letter, I did something else. I decided it was time to move forward with the next phase of my plan. The house had been sitting empty for 2 months while I had it renovated. Now it was time to find tenants, but not just any tenants. I had someone specific in mind. I called Dorothy and explained what I wanted to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke. You want Katie to rent the house? Helen's old house? Yes. Katie is working in Phoenix now, right? And you mentioned she was looking for a place to live that was closer to her job. She is. But Cecilia, that seems like it might be uncomfortable for her. That house has bad memories. Or it could be a way to reclaim those memories.
Your mother kicked Katie out of that house and made her feel worthless. What if Katie got to live there now, as a successful adult with a good job, proving that she's nothing like what my mother said she was? Dorothy was quiet again. Let me talk to Katie. I'll call you back. Katie called me herself 2 hours later. She was 34 now, working as a financial analyst for a renewable energy company. Her voice was warm and curious. Aunt Cecilia, my mom told me about your offer. I have to admit, it's appealing. I've been looking at rentals in that neighborhood and everything is either too expensive or not well maintained. Your place sounds perfect. But I need to know something first. Is this about getting back at Aunt Helen, or is this a legitimate rental offer? It's both, I said honestly. I want a good tenant who will take care of the house and pay rent on time. But I also want my mother to see that the people she tried to break are thriving. You're successful and independent, Katie. You survived what she did to you and built a good life. I think you living in that house would be a powerful statement. When can I see it? We met at the house 3 days later. Katie walked through every room, her expression shifting from cautious to delighted. The house really did look beautiful now that all the repairs were done. The updated kitchen gleamed with new appliances. The bathrooms had been retiled. The hardwood floors had been refinished to a rich shine. I love it, Katie said finally. And honestly, you're right. There's something satisfying about the idea of living here after what Aunt Helen did. Like I'm taking back something she tried to steal from me. So you're interested? I'm very interested. When can I move in? The lease was signed within a week. Katie moved in on the 1st of September, and I made sure my mother found out about it. I did not tell her directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I let Patricia mention it casually the next time my mother drove by the house to stare at it from the street. According to Patricia, my mother had gone pale when she heard who was living there. Your niece Katie? Dorothy's daughter? Yes. Isn't that nice? The family is staying connected to the house even though you sold it. My mother had driven away without another word. 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at my apartment again. This time she did not pound on the door or make a scene. She simply knocked quietly and waited. I almost did not answer, but something made me open the door. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. Her hair had gone grayer. Her clothes were not as carefully put together as they usually were. She looked like a woman who was finally understanding the full scope of what she had lost. Can I come in? She asked. No. Cecilia, please. I need to talk to you. Then talk. You can say whatever you need to say from right there. She stood in the hallway, her hands clasped in front of her, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine uncertainty in her face. I came to tell you that you win. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. I understand now what you wanted me to feel. I understand what it's like to lose everything and have nowhere to turn. You haven't lost everything. You have a condo. You have income. You have your health. I've lost my home. I've lost my dignity. I've lost my family. Her voice cracked. I know what I did to Isabel was wrong. I know I've done wrong things to a lot of people over the years. I'm asking you to please stop punishing me for it. I'm not punishing you. You're experiencing the natural consequences of your own choices. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you've gone out of your way to make my life as difficult as possible. Buying my house, having Katie move into it, blocking my calls, having me removed from your apartment. You've systematically cut me out of your life, the way you cut Isabel out of yours. I know I did that, and it was wrong. What more do you want from me? I'm admitting I was wrong. I'm apologizing. What else can I do? I looked at her. This woman who had shaped so much of my life, who had taught me both what to be and what never to become. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to let this go and try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But the larger part of me remembered every time she had apologized before, every time she had promised to change, only to fall back into the same patterns once she felt secure again. Here's what you can do, I said slowly. You can learn to live with the consequences of your actions. You can figure out how to survive without using other people. You can become the person you always claimed to be, but never actually were. And if you manage to do that, if you manage to genuinely change and not just pretend to change until you get what you want, then maybe someday we can have a conversation about forgiveness. But that day is not today. When will it be? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe someday. That's up to you. I closed the door before she could respond. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for a long moment before finally walking away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Isabel had been listening from the living room. She came to stand beside me as I watched my mother disappear down the hallway. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know yet.
Ask me in a year. My mother never did apologize sincerely. She moved out of Phoenix 6 months later, relocating to Tucson, where she knew no one and could start fresh, without the constant reminder of everything she had lost. She sold the condo at a loss and moved into a small apartment. Her social media posts became infrequent and bland, stripped of the bragging and self-congratulation that had once characterized them. Patricia told me that my mother looked diminished the last time she saw her, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her consequences had physically compressed her. She had tried to rebuild her life, but the financial strain and social isolation had taken their toll. Her retirement years, which should have been comfortable and dignified, were now marked by careful budgeting and quiet loneliness. She had finally learned what it felt like to be cast aside with nowhere to turn, and the lesson had broken something fundamental in her that could never quite be repaired. As for me, I kept the house, and Katie remained an excellent tenant. Isabel graduated with honors and found a job at a marketing firm where her creativity and kindness were valued. She moved into her own apartment, decorated it exactly how she wanted, and built a life free from anyone's expectations except her own. The experience with my mother had taught both of us something valuable about setting boundaries and refusing to accept cruelty disguised as love. I never regretted what I had done. Some people might call it revenge, but I called it justice. My mother had spent years teaching people painful lessons about consequences. In the end, she simply became her own best student, and that felt exactly right.